Joining me live now is Mike Kelly, Labor Friends of Israel co-convener and one of the former Labor politicians to sign this open letter today, very much ramping up pressure on the Prime Minister at this stage. Mike, I don't know if you were just tuning into that press conference there at the end. Did you catch much of his shift in language?
Yes, Julia, it's encouraging. I mean, it's not a sign of weakness for a leader to change their position when they have access to more information and also when they're picking up a national mood, particularly if you're a leader of a democratic country and you're getting now almost just a chorus of voices from every possible sector of our community who are really underlining the fact that they want national leadership on this because it's a national problem and that is so many dimensions and aspects of this that go beyond what we've seen described in the very narrow cast terms of reference that have been given to Dennis Richardson. And I fully support what the Prime Minister says, that that sort of work needs to go ahead straight away because, you know, there are people out there with the same mindset, with the same access to weapons, with the same ability to put together improvised explosive devices, and every agency should be doing a hot wash after action review of these things. But with all of these broader ecosystem issues around the terrorist situation that we have globally that's playing out here, and all of the issues that we have about the undermining of our social cohesion through the malign influence of foreign actors, through the social media activities they're engaged in, and the sort of collaboration that needs to go on across the liberal democratic world to fight back, these are the things that need to be unpacked by a Royal Commission. And if that takes a while, well, then so be it. Let's get that job done properly.
And I had you on the show about a week ago when you were really ramping up your calls for this type of inquiry too. Now we see you as part of this long list of Labor figures calling for a Royal Commission at a federal level. It's been an incredible show of unity right across the board, as you say, business community, top barristers, the victims' families, sporting heroes, the list goes on. Do you think it's inevitable now that the Prime Minister will make this move and change his tune?
Well, in a situation of a true democracy, it should be. It should be basically a trend and a trajectory that drives us to this conclusion. But what I'm also expecting is that when caucus is brought back to Parliament, they'll be discussing in that party room all of the information, the feedback that they are getting at the coalface from their communities. And that's how the system should work. And in the context of them feeding that in, then the Prime Minister and his advisors should say, OK, well, you know, that's new information. We understand the broader context. But beyond that, I don't think up until now the consideration has been given to the healing process that also is consequent on a decent Royal Commission. I saw that play out with the Veterans Royal Commission, which, you know, we saw both sides of politics push back on that. And then we saw the benefit of it. And it was the public and it was the veterans and the grieving families that drove that pressure. And I saw how during the course of that Royal Commission, those who were so aggrieved took ownership of it. It was an independent inquiry. They had trust in it and they were able to get some closure and healing from it. And that's what needs to happen now. Probably not just for the Jewish community, but think about the families of the victims of the Bali bombings who will be triggered by what's gone on and shocked by the added dimension that this is on Australian soil, and those who lost their lives in the 9/11 attacks and all the various acts of Islamist extremism around the world that Australians have lost their lives or been grievously injured. And we should remember that 55 people were injured with these gunshots, and it could have been even worse. And 15 killed. Could have been even worse if these pipe bombs had detonated. So it's not just also the technical issues here, it's the issues of how does someone get groomed and indoctrinated to be able to look down their scope and shoot a 10-year-old little girl.
There's so many elements to this. You've got, you know, possible influence of hate preachers, the fact that we know ASIO was tracking one of those alleged gunmen since 2019. There's so many things to look into that predate the events of that Bondi attack. And of course, this climate of anti-Semitism too, which we've been speaking about so consistently. When Scott Morrison was Prime Minister, I think it was, we heard Anthony Albanese speaking about that need for a royal commission into veterans' suicide, and at that time accusing Scott Morrison of ignoring the pleas of grieving families. So I guess that's what's been happening here. It has been more of a hypocritical stance, some could suggest.
Yeah, as I say, both sides of politics pushed back to begin with on that. But then, yes, the opposition at the time were getting the feedback and the community sense, and their radars were up, and their radars need to be up now. But as you mentioned, what's emerging too is the issues about the siloed approach that we have in this federal structure, and issues around the communications and dealings between federal agencies and the police and the state police. And there are a lot of issues around the technology that could help us with that. We're talking about the need to surface data points from different issues, such as weapons acquisition, acquiring precursor materials for improvised explosive devices, what movements people are engaged in, what financial transactions are going on. So these data points need to be digitised and networked, and then to enable exchange between federal and state agencies, the systems put in place that protect privacy, that ensure that there are permissions controls and access regimes, that make sure that material isn't compromised in relation to prosecutions, etc. All of these tools are there, but we're just behind the curve on acquiring those. So those things need to be teased out. And for the Prime Minister, this could serve as a very critical moment where you draw a bright red line under what's happened over the last 2 years, and you say, look, okay, we hear you, we're listening, we're going to move on here, we're going to do the remediation of all the grievance and contribute to the healing, and set a new path ahead for the government to accept the callings of not just the Jewish community, but the broader community that are concerned with Islamist extremism.
I want to pick you up on something you said earlier too in your press conference. We've seen previously that Commonwealth officers have been reluctant to speak fully and openly unless they have the legal protections of a Commonwealth Royal Commission regarding the Iraq War you were speaking about. So this is a big thing too. It's actually getting people to speak in a forum they're comfortable in.
Absolutely. And, you know, we were very poorly served by not being able to have a proper Royal Commission into the Iraq War. The detailed inquiries that were conducted in the UK and US were very beneficial. You need to learn the lessons from a war like that and the situation in which it arose. And I had a colleague who's a defence civilian in a defence science group who was really keen to reveal what he knew and learn the lessons from it. He wasn't going to speak anonymously or to the media, and he wanted that legal protective framework that a federal Royal Commission would offer him. And I know that there are people within, you know, our intelligence establishment and police services who will have things to say but won't say them unless, you know, they have that level of protection. And of course, a federal Commonwealth Royal Commission will have the ability to compel agencies and officers to appear and do it within secure frameworks, and so that information is protected, and then issue interim reports and recommendations as they go along, which could also be protected. So there's no excuses. There shouldn't be citing issues around the time associated with doing this properly, because we can get on with the things we need to in the interim anyway. So let's just see reason here. And, you know, in the Army, we had a saying, which was lead, follow, or get out of the way. So I think, you know, what we need to see from the government now is, there go my people, I must follow them.
Oh, well, Mike Kelly, fascinating developments. We'll see where this goes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Julia. Cheers.